Okay, I'm gonna talk about socialism and communism. So a lot of people think that the United States is capitalist. Let's say Cuba, socialist, China, Russia is communist, but all of these are wrong. Actually, the United States is a mixed economy and a mixed form of government. Econ and government. Um, and then these ones, Cuba and Russia and China, they're actually oligarchs. Oligarchy, dictatorship. Okay, and this is important, right? Because when people are having political discourse, I see this a lot. Is that let's talk about the United States. Is it's too black and white. They say capitalism good, socialism, communism bad. Um, I'm talking about some Republicans, and this is very misleading because they don't understand that um, they're pushing for something that is going to further enslave the common worker. And I'll give you an example. So there was this guy on the radio. He's conservative, and he always talk. He says, "Oh, you libtards, you snowflakes, and stuff like that." And he's just creating controversy. The problem with people like that and the sheep that follow him is that they don't understand the people in power. They want to give this narrative that, oh yeah, you have to vote for capitalist policies, uh, and unbeknownst to them, you're enslaving yourself, right? You are the only people benefiting are the people who say, oh yeah, let's go more towards corporate America, right? It's at the end of the day, it's a spectrum, and you want a mix in the center. You want to stay here in this Goldilocks zone, but you don't want to go full communism, full, zero incentive. But right, but you also don't want to go into the brutality of, a corporate America. Ah, fuck. Corporate America, right? You want a mixture of these things. You want okay, so um, a little history, right? Because this isn't the first time that we've fought against this, against the greedy people in power. Back in when the United States was a colony, we revolted. No kings, pretty much the same concept from today. But why we say that is because we were being taxed unfairly, and it create a king is another form of an oligarchy. A king is just another way to say, yeah, they were dictators. They have overwhelming power and influence. Um, and so yeah, we got away from that. Then there was an incident of a warehouse burning, right? Warehouse burning, and this gave rise to um, or what is it? Regulations, right? To think about OSHA, stuff like that. So the story behind this is there was a factory, I don't know, somewhere in the East Coast, and they had balloon framing warehouses. The problem with these types of structures is that they're not compartmentalized, and so fire just spreads instantly all over the place, and everyone burned to death. It was tragic, and because of that, like I said, you have regulations. Another thing is, remember, the oil barons and the railroad owners, they create a monopoly, right? They create a monopoly, and the problem with that is that, yeah, at a certain point, we recognize collectively that companies that get too big, they crush the competition, and competition is good for a flourishing economy. So we gotta, we eliminated a monopoly, and we started to think about stuff like unions, worker rights. And obviously, even within unions, there's people like the managers, and sometimes they take advantage of people. But think about the intent. The intent is worker rights, moving away from the brutality of the owners having full control. Right back in the day, you had stuff like sweatshops, you know, and that's pretty much what this warehouse was. Uh, and what does that give rise to? Child labor laws, just labor laws in general, right? So stuff like this is, I'm not sure if that's the word correctly, but it's an addendum. I don't know. They're added onto what a capitalist is. So capitalist, and all of these definitions are it means privatization of the means of production. Okay. And what is means of production? Well, that just means resources, right? So you go out into the woods, you chop the wood, and you sell furniture, right? You mine metals and you sell iPads. So that means that you can create your own business, right? Privatization. Any citizen can create this stuff, and they can, trade. They create their own industry, their own business. And under stuff like socialism and communism, the reason why that's bad is because, in these situations, for socialisms, it's for the people, so it's public. And in communism, it's the government, right? And so that's just an extra step of this sort of middleman mafia. All right, so basically, what I'm trying to say with all this is that don't take the brainwashing that you don't think for a second that you can define any nation on this planet by just simply calling them either one of these things, right? There's not a single nation on this earth that's fully capitalist, fully socialist, fully communist, right? Because like I said, China, Russia, they're oligarchy. So it's a mixture of these things, right? And that's the key, is you want to have the right mixture. That's what creates a happy community, a happy society within your country. That's what allows people to flourish, is that perfect mixture. And so when we have these conversations, this is what I notice is a lot of people, this is, like I said, this is the definition of being a capitalist, right? Privatization. And so before then, like I told you, you had these incidents, you had these tragedies, you had the sweatshops, the monopolies, but then you move into and you improve on this system, and you add on to it. These are additions. You add on to this, right? The regulations and the unions and the labor laws. And so this no longer is capitalism, right? This is not capitalism. What we have currently is a mixture, And the what pisses me off is that the modern conversation, you hear people who should know better, right? Who say, "Oh, let's fight for capitalism." And they're kind of lying by omission, right? Because they say capitalism, and you as a voter, as a working man, you think, oh yeah, they're going to find ways to benefit me. They're going to find ways to eliminate the wealth gap. They're going to find ways to make my life better. But no, in their mind, they're thinking, how am I going to benefit? They're thinking about capitalism and they want to go towards the other way. They want to go towards the brutality, the corporate America. Okay. Um, well, anyway, this is why whenever people are having political conversations, I dislike when they attach themselves to a very amorphous, right, a very generalized cause. People will say, "Oh, I'm a Democrat. Oh, I'm a Republican." But what the fuck does that mean? It means nothing, right? Because people will have different ideas of what each of these definitions are. Person A will say, "Oh yeah, being a Democrat is you're a square and you're a triangle, and being a Republican means you're a triangle and a square." And person B will think, "Oh yeah, being a Democrat means you're a circle, and being a Republican means you're a rectangle, right?" And so when these two people are communicating and they're having conversation, and this guy says, "Oh yeah, I'm a Democrat," this is what he's talking about, but this is what this person is, right? Basically, they're lost in translation, right? And this is where it all breaks down, right? So this is why I say, yeah, I would rather just go to the source, go direct, and talk about policy, right? Let's just talk about policy. Forget the cults of personalities. Forget, oh, I voted for Donald Trump. I voted for Obama, right? Is because there's nothing concrete from doing that. You don't know what their course of action. You don't know what they're actually going to do until they specifically say, "Hey, this is what I'm going to do." And this is what people rely on. They're like, "Oh, he's a Republican, so in general, I trust that this person is going to push the government in a certain direction." That might have been true, before the 90s, let's say, but because this country is continuously evolving, people have found ways to exploit the system. I'll give you an example, right? When I used to drive, um, I used to see people, uh, respect the lights, the traffic lights. But after years and years of driving, I've noticed that people will here and there, it's maybe midnight and there's no cars around, and yeah, they probably shouldn't run that red light, but they see, oh, there's no one here, there's no cameras, and I'm just going to go and take advantage of this and break the law and break the rules. It's the same thing with what we have now, is that people, maybe back in the day, they stuck to or they were beholden to their constituents. They're like, I am running to be a Republican and I'm going to do Republican things. But that's not the case anymore, right? Now we're in a society that's past that, and it's the haves versus the have-nots, the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, right? The people in the power versus the common person. And this is what freaking Karl Marx, is it with a K? I don't remember. Karl Marx, you know, people will talk shit about communism and Marxism and all this shit. I'm not saying that you have to take 100% out of it. You know, follow him to the letter, exactly all his instructions. People haven't even read the book or what he stands for. In the very beginning, he gives an example of a factory making nails. You know, and he's saying that uh, that in general, right, is basically saying that, yeah, there are the owners and they did provide you a job and you should, you know, they should be compensated for that. But also there's the worker, and without the worker, there's not a single nail being fabricated, right? So am I saying it has to be 50-50? Am I saying it has to be 1%, 99%? Am I saying it should be 70-30? I'm not giving you the percentage. I'm saying we have to have that conversation, right, to figure out, because right now we can see that there's a wealth gap, right? right? We could see that, given inflation and cost of living and all this shit, all these statistics, we see that relatively back in the day, you could have been making, or actually, if minimum wage right now, let's say it'll be 20. So you guys can give a nice figure just comparatively. People make calculations and they're like, oh yeah, back in the day, adjusted, we should have been making 50 an hour, right? So that's what we're saying, is that companies are finding ways to squeeze more production out of you, give you less compensation, and they're learning, right? They're constantly finding more effective ways to enslave you, more effective ways to take as much as they can without you revolting. Revolting, right? That's the word, rebelling. So, is that all I want to say? Oh yeah, I want to talk about this again. So basically, what I'm saying in all this is that you have to understand the concept, very simple concept of what a definition is. What a definition is, and it's the concept of definition is that it has certain parameters, right? Like a dog. You say what a dog is, and you have an image of what that could be, right? It has a very strict parameters, constraints of what a dog is. I'm not gonna say, hey, point me to a dog, and you show me a bike. A bike isn't within those parameters. A car isn't a dog, right? It's very simple parameters. And what I see in politics is that capitalism has very simple parameters in this box, and people like to add stuff. And so this is the part that I have difficulty explaining, is that the reason why it's important to know and understand definitions is that so you know what we're talking about, right? Because when people try to champion capitalism, what they're really championing is a mixed economy, right? It's all this other shit. But when the people in power are championing something like capitalism, it's because they're in a position to benefit from that. They're in a position to lead you astray and say in the with the excuse, oh yeah, it's capitalism, but really they're pushing for corporate America. Or the same thing with the libtards, right? When they talk about communism, is because they want a welfare state. They want to receive more than what they give. So again, it's all about the balance. Oh shit. It's all about the balance, and yeah, like I said, understanding the definitions is the first step. Okay, that's all I want to say.